Welcome to the Jericho Force podcast, where we learn how to integrate faith into the work that we do. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. Here's our host, my husband, author, speaker, teacher, encourager, and stewardship coach, Jason Davis.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify, and welcome to the Jericho Force podcast. And here on the Jericho Force podcast, we talk about how we live out our faith in the marketplace, how we integrate faith into the work that we do. I am really excited and fired up for tonight's episode because it's with somebody that I know. She's my sister in Christ and a friend of mine. And I'm telling you, this is going to be a powerful conversation. But before I bring her on, let me introduce you to her. Irina Curenton is an author, educator, and transformational coach passionate about seeing mothers and families thrive, heal, and walk in wholeness together. As a daughter who's witnessed her mother overcome addiction and beat the odds, and a wife and mother of 6, who has walked through her own extensive 12-year healing process in the midst of motherhood, she carries a unique perspective, equipped with both experience and expertise to educate mothers and families on restoring peace in the home, accelerate the healing process, and break through relational-emotional barriers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Jericho Force podcast, Miss Irina Curenton, the mom coach.
Hey, Jason. Can you
How are
hear
you
me
doing?
okay?
I surely can.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yes. Irina, this was, we talked about this months ago, about you coming on. Folks, you don't know, when we were talking offline, Irina and I, we were talking about this months ago, and we talked about how exciting it would be, and we looked forward to it. And here we are, Irina, in 2022, after having conversation in the late summer, early fall of 2021. My God, how fast time flies.
Right. Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm just so grateful, Jason, for the work that you do and the ways that you empower other leaders in the workplace and the workforce in the marketplace. And so I'm excited to have this conversation, and I love that theme of living out your faith in the marketplace. I mean, I'm just grateful to be here today.
Love it, love it. Well, let's dive in. We got all the excitement. Let's dive in, and let's help our listeners out, because Irina, one of my motivations, God, just the favor that he gave me with this platform. Shout out to Batman, Jerry Royce. The favor that the Lord gave me here with this podcast and just in the creation of the show, I really wanted people to know, look, we live in a broken and fractured world, and there's all these different pressures that are pulling on us at times. But I wanted people to know, no matter what your occupation, no matter your industry, whether you're male, female, young or old, rich or poor, no matter the status, that's what I love about the kingdom of God. It's possible for you to live out your faith in the marketplace, and men and women are doing it. And people who, it's not like people are perfect. These are people who have had very traumatic things occur in their life. And God, the grace of God is with them, and they were able to persevere. And so that's what I love. So Irina, as we jump into tonight, a lot of folks, they heard your bio and they're like, man, this lady has a lot going on, relational, emotional barriers and, 12-year healing process. But we know that didn't happen overnight. Irina, you're called the mom coach. So talk to us about your professional background. How did you even get into coaching and where you are today?
That's a great question, Jason. So as far as my professional background, I guess I would need to go kind of give you a little bit of backstory here. So from the time that I was little, I've been watching families because I didn't come from a really good family, and so I was curious as to how did families actually, work together and walk together and thrive and all of that. And so I would think, like, well, what am I going to do with my life? You know how you go to school and they ask you, oh, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I didn't really know. I wanted to, be some kind of counselor or something. And so, long story short, I went to school for psychology and social work, and I have about 20 years of experience with children and families, 14 of those years creating a safe space for children in my own home daycare center. I've also worked with at-risk youth for about 6 years, and I've also done some administrative work. So I have a pretty well-rounded perspective here. And it was really during that work with at-risk youth that a friend of mine had suggested that I start going into childcare. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know really. But, one day I was standing in the kitchen at this group home where I was working with these at-risk youth, and my heart just felt grieved within me. And I just started looking at the young men that I was working with, and I'm like, man, isn't there something that can be done? Like, I hate to see them in so much pain and turmoil and acting out these behaviors. I said, what can I do? And I started having a conversation with God, and I'm like, God, what can I do? And the question that came back to me, because God usually answers a question with a question. And so the question was, what if you start working with the children ages 0 to 5 and partner with parents to lay the foundation, inoculating children with truth, love, and trust, so they don't end up in this situation? And so that kind of started my journey. And fast forward, in 2018, I heard God say again, it's time to expand into the community and teach parents what you know. Because, prior to then, I had worked with the children, and I had worked very hard and very intentionally to create a safe space for them. And then I started noticing over time that moms needed that kind of safe space as well. And so God started speaking to me in 2018 and said, it's time to expand and teach these parents and the moms specifically of how to, how to create that kind of safe space at home. And then last year, it got even more defined that I started writing a book. And I heard very clearly in March of 2021, he said, I want you to write to set families free. I've called you to write, to heal the wounds and scars that parents pass on to their children unknowingly. I've thoroughly prepared you for this task, and I need you to release my word, to release parents from that mentality and equip them to become the parents they desire to be. And then he said, and then he went on to say, I also called you to heal the mothers. Mothers are the heart and the anchor of the home. And so that really defined how I became the mom coach. So what I do is I help moms and, really get through or grow through that stress and anxiety, really healing the little girl within so they can be further equipped to parent their children the way that God intended them, and the way that they actually want to parent without all of that extra baggage and all of that. So that's, long story short, that's how I'm known as the mom coach.
Wow. Folks, there you have it. What a story from Irina. You talked about, Irina, working with the at-risk youth, and then having a in-home daycare, and then you having administrative gifts. And it's funny, folks, if you're listening to this, you don't know how the combination of your skills and gifts come together. So we can't be so narrow-minded on what we think we're going to do. You see, in Irina's case, she was walking with God, and things got revealed over time. So, Irina, you have the combination of at-risk youth, the daycare, administration, and then you got a burden. There was a burden on your heart. It broke your heart to see just the condition the conditions that you saw some of the children in, and then you had a burden in your heart, and then you partnered with God along the way to explore more of what that was, and then here you are. First it was the youth, and it expanded to, hey, what about the mothers? What about moms? They deal with so much. And then even further expansion into writing a book. So, Irina, what I love about your story is it's the epitome of walking by faith, even when it's kind of messy and you don't really know what to do. And I hope folks, as you're listening to Irina describe her journey, it's not always going to be perfect, So Irina, and thinking back and reflecting on that, what were some key takeaways for you? Because you gave the overview of the journey, but maybe what were your top 2 lessons you learned in that process of following God to where you are now?
So, gosh, I mean, when you talked about the messy journey, and the faith can be kind of messy, that's so true. That's one of my biggest takeaways, is that, it's not always going to be perfect. That's one of the things I really struggled with, because I was one of those kids that they wanted everything to be perfect. I felt like I had to be perfect because,
Mm-hmm.
To be liked, and I wanted to win the love and approval of my mom and, my parents, and it just felt like I just couldn't please. And so, that's one of the things. God really had to break me of that perfectionism. And that's one, oh my goodness, there's so much I could say about that. But, just taking action, even if it's messy action, with God is better than no action. That's good. So one of the things, I guess, to go along with that is that as you're walking out your business and walking in faith in the marketplace, it's so important that we just start building that routine, that habit, because we can't even start to perfect that habit or get really good at that until we actually start to have that consistency. And, for example, when we're posting, you should go and post videos and things like that on a daily basis, or whatever God speaks to you about, because you're just building that habit. And then once you go into, you have this consistency, then you can start to hone that talent and that gift and that skill set. So that way you can actually take and focus on the other things. So if that makes sense.
Ooh, that's good. Irina, you're starting to get me a little excited. I was like, oh, she's starting to preach a little bit. Okay. See, folks, I know this about Irina, so she's starting to let a little bit of the fire out. She sounds all sweet and nice, but trust me, when the Holy Spirit gets a hold of her, she can get going. So Irina, you said something key, and we won't linger here too long, but I did want people to hear your take on this. You talked about perfectionism and how what the toll that really takes. Just help people out for a second, because I feel like while you're being transparent and vulnerable about it, a lot of people deal with that. They want everything to be perfect. Maybe there's somebody, whether it's a parent or maybe it's a certain relationship they have with God, or maybe they're chasing after something where everything just has to be perfect. Just talk and unpack that briefly, your experience with it.
Okay. So one of the things that I want to say is that perfectionism can be almost like a death trap if you're not careful, because you can want to do something so right, quote unquote, and so perfect that you never get started.
Wow.
And it's, I remember, oh goodness, I did this with everything. It was like even writing letters. Even doing work in school, I would start, with the bubble letters in school, and I would be writing, the bubble letters. I'd mess up one thing, and I'd crumple up the paper and just start all over from scratch. And I was just, it was all about, it really, for me, it was rooted in performance orientation and people pleasing. And
Wow.
so I had this, and which really boils down to its idolatry. You know,
Yeah.
when we start to put our faith in people, and when we have this fear, because, you know, all of it, really the thing behind it is fear. And so when we get into that space where we're looking at people as, you know, this huge, you know, looking up at people and saying, hey, you know, I want to be, I want them to like me, and, you know, I want to be perfect, that we can actually start losing ourselves and our identity. Because, you know, for me, I got so wrapped up in perfectionism that I actually, at one point, I stressed myself out so much, and I didn't ask for help. So I got to this place of burnout, and, you know, I was doing all the things. I also had this superwoman syndrome that, you know, I could do all these things because for a long time I felt helpless. And then as I started gaining this confidence, it was like, okay, I can't let anybody know that I'm struggling, because if I let somebody know, they're going to think I'm not competent. And, you know, so I have to put on this front that I'm, you know, that I'm perfect, so that they don't see my flaws, and they, you know, that they can't hurt me. And so, you know, behind all of that, I felt insecure. And there's a lot of insecurity that goes along with this perfectionism, because, you know, you can't let people know that you're not okay. And so, you know, I actually had to go to the hospital because I could have died. I started having this pain in my leg, and, you know, I went to the hospital, and it was a blessing that there was a pain, because normally there wouldn't be. Like, the doctor told me, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you came in, because you have a deep vein thrombosis, and, you know, that could have, had it come loose and traveled to your heart and to your brain, you could have died.
Oh my
and there's
goodness.
not a lot of, and a lot of cases, there's not any kind of warning. There's usually not pain that goes along with it. So it was a blessing that I happened to have this pain, and I could almost hardly walk. And it stemmed from this stress that I had put on myself from trying to be perfect, trying to live up to this image that I had of myself based on my own expectations of what I thought that other people might think of me. I mean, just talking about it now, it just sounds so crazy, but that's real. That's what I struggled with. And, you know, bottom line is I did not trust God. I had to learn how to trust God. And that was a long process, because, you know, when you have trauma happen at an early age, it's so hard to actually trust God. And so God had to take me through this 12-year process to learn how to trust him. And it was one of the hardest, most challenging parts of my life that I mean, it was just, it was grueling. Yeah. But I'm so grateful that I went through that, or that God took me through that. And I went kicking and screaming. I did, but you know, God knows what he's doing, and he knows what we need.
Yes, he does. We're all his sons and daughters, and he knows exactly how each of us work, because he created us. He knew us before we were in our mother's wombs. Irina, that was so good, you breaking that down, and I feel like that really is going to help a lot of people who may struggle with perfectionism. And there were so many underlying things you talked about: insecurity, fear, and at some point for all of us, while we're dealing with those things, we have to understand our identity and what does Christ say concerning these things. We know that the Word tells us that we've not been given a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. We know what it says about anxiety, that we can cast all our cares on him because he loves us first. And Irina, you were literally walking this thing out with God, and so this is going to bless a lot of people. In Irina, I feel like this is the perfect segue because you were starting to get into what you dealt with. So we have your professional experience, but tell us a little bit more about the testimony, because 12 years, that's a long time. And I know this, could be a little bit vulnerable, but just touch on, if you can, the role that the Lord played in all this process. You talked about the inflection point professionally, but what was it? What was that turning point in your faith personally? Because I don't know any kingdom business owner that where they're at now professionally, they had a moment professionally, but they also had a moment personally. What was that moment for you?
So, Jason, for me, that moment was really when and my phone did cut out, so I did miss part of what you said, but from what I'm gathering, just my faith and what was my turning point in that space. So for me, that really goes back to 2008, and that journey, that 12-year journey that I took, because there were two turning points. So one was in 2008 when I realized that I could not do what I need to do or raise my children from a place of wholeness without actually having gone through the work myself. And so that was turning point number one. And, that's when I started that whole process of learning how to trust God. The second turning point came in 2016 where, the first turning point, I went kicking and screaming in 2016. I actually went to an event, and it was a Heal Her event. And I saw this lady standing on the stage, and she was sharing her personal testimony, and she had done it without her mom. Up until this point, my mom, and I want to give her a shout out because she is an amazing woman. There were so many things that, she struggled through. And yes, she did take me through some things with her, but where she is now, I'm amazed at the testimony that she has. And so I just want to give her a quick shout out. But I had realized that up until that point, I had kind of ridden off the coattails of my mom and in her faith. And, all of that. And then here this woman stands in front of me, and I'm looking like, wow, she did all this without her mom. So my wheels started turning, and God started speaking to me, and he's like, it's time, daughter. And so I started wanting more. I started wanting a deeper journey in faith, and I wanted to be able to be empowered, because at this point I was still kind of stuck in that victim mentality, and so it's like and I saw myself, I had seen myself previously standing on stages and speaking and all these things, and I was very, I don't want to say shy, but I was kind of, more introverted and quiet, but there was like this woman that was trying to come out of me, and I'm like, oh, is it safe? And at this point, I wanted to go through this journey again, and I wanted to do it from a place of love and a place of trust. And, I wanted to have people come with me. I saw how, there was a room full of women in the room, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what if I could empower other women? What if I could impact just one with my story?
Wow.
And that really was my turning point, and I'm just grateful, and I guess that would really be the turning point of how we got here to this point, being at the mom coach, and so that's really it. It's obviously there's more to tell, but I want to make sure that we're sticking with.
No worries, all good. That is powerful, Irina. My goodness. And you're right, you said, and that brings us to where you are now, the mom coach. So, mom coach, you're working with families, moms, the youth. What are some of the lessons that you teach, Irina, when you're working with clients and working with families? How do you go about doing it? Like, what foundation do you think a family should be built on? What issues do you see? You know, when we think about your bio, there's that relational, emotional part. So just talk to us about some of the transformation that comes out of when families or moms work with you.
That's a great question, Jason. So there's so much. There really is so much to unpack here. But one of the things that I work with moms and families about is you have to have that communication, that connection. It really, before you can even start to communicate, you have to have that connection point. And in order to have that connection point and it be solid, there has to be trust in the relationship. And a lot of times that what I find is that trust is broken.
Wow.
And most specifically, I'll just go into my most recent kind of awakening point. I actually have 6 young men that are my own, and so in my children, my relationship with my children, one of the things that God has been really dealing with me on is respect, the respect factor. Because for women, and for girls, it's the love. You know, we need love, but men need respect. And so that's the latest discovery that I've had, and so that's one of the women that we actually Saturday we had a workshop. I do co-working and we do some productivity sessions, and so I was working with a mom on Saturday, and I was sharing with her my discovery, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I want to join you on this journey." Because I need to know about this too. So she's like, I need to know everything you know, so let me know as you know. So that's just kind of how we flow, is like, you know, the things that I learned and I impart to them. And it's just a beautiful flow because it's, you know, I walk it and then I teach it. And so it's quite interesting how that works. And so that's another point, is like this newest point of, you know, this respect factor. And some of the other things is I've learned and I teach is about this assertiveness and boundary setting. That's a really big key in the relationship. And, you know, it shows up in husband and wife relationships. It shows up in parent and child relationships. It's like usually there's one, and I find that a lot of the moms I work with, there's, you know, they've had that bent towards people pleasing, or they've had that perfectionism, or they've had this, you know, obsession with being this super mom, superwoman, and so they have trouble setting boundaries. And so it's when we can start to unlock who they are in Christ, when we can start to unlock who they are, they can start to feel more confident and comfortable in setting those boundaries. And it's just, I'm so grateful. I have this 12-week accelerator, it's really actually a 10-day accelerator. It used to be a 30-day, but God really gave me a blueprint to teach it in 10 days, and it just set one of the moms that I worked with, she owns 4 businesses, and she worked with me for that 2 weeks, and she is still talking about how, oh my gosh, you just unlocked me, Irina. It's amazing. I just felt like I can do all of these things. I helped her to get the things together. You know, she felt like everything, she was impacted in all of her, there's 5 different areas that we work with. So there's mental, emotional, physical, relational, and spiritual. And those 5 key areas, if you know, as we work together on those 5 key areas, it starts to unlock your potential. and then opens you for more and more of God, what God has for you. So that's kind of in short what I do with my accelerators, and I'm grateful, but there's definitely so much more that I could share here, but yeah, those are some of the things that we work through.
Wow, that's powerful, Irina. And as you were talking, talking about the difference, and really you got a download from the Lord, Irina, and look how it impacted your business. And folks, if you're listening, Irina talked about partnering with God, or at least it came out in her story and her background and testimony, but that's a prime living example of, her seeking God, praying, and the Lord gave the idea. We know He's omnipotent, He's omnipresent. All things are made for Him and through Him. So business and the marketplace and economics is no different. And Irina, you were seeking God, and then boom, He gives you a download, and then there's your accelerator, and then He brings to your attention the respect. And folks, if you notice the verbiage Irina was using as well, it comes right out of Scripture, because it in Scripture it challenges husbands to love their wives as Christ loves the church, and then it talks to the wives about respecting their husbands. So it literally, the download that Irina got as far as working that into her content and into her accelerator comes right out of Scripture. That's what we mean by partnering with God. That's huge, Irina. I feel like this is really helping a lot of folks. So Irina, you've got the accelerator. What are some other ways? Do you have any group programs, or is it one-on-one? How are you able to handle so many families or so many moms at a time?
So I do offer one-on-one coaching, and I do have group coaching as well. And so we actually, a lot of the moms that I meet with, we do meet weekly on Saturdays, and we actually work through some projects together. And so I provide accountability. And then we also, as I provide the accountability, we're also working through, talking through different issues that the families are having, that the moms are having, and we address those right then and there on the call. We also do journaling and seeking God right there on the call. And so every mom walks away with their own unique answers. And so that's something I really get very passionate and excited about, serving these ladies, because it's just so amazing. I hear so many different testimonies coming from that weekly workshop that we have, and I've actually been doing that since November of last year. When one of my friends, and she asked me to coach her, and said, Irina, I just don't know what I'm going to do. She was at an 8 level overwhelming anxiety.
Oh, wow.
She had 7 kids, and she was homeschooling, and she just felt like she was way behind. And she's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. She was having trouble in her marriage, and it was just so, I'm leaning in, and I'm listening, and I'm like, I'm praying on the call, and I'm like, oh my gosh, God, what do you want me to do? Right then and there, God dropped workshop in my spirit. And I said, okay, all right, we're having a workshop. So I tell her that we're going to have a workshop. And so long story short, this is, that really was the foundation for the accelerator as well. So, we started with the workshops, and then it slowly and surely turned into other programs as well. So I do offer that. I also offer some, serve moms and families in different ways as well. So I'm on Clubhouse.
Yes, please tell them about Clubhouse. I was hoping you were going to bring that up, because I just, folks, and I know Irina personally, I remember when the Lord was talking to you about that. So tell everyone about some of what you do on Clubhouse.
Okay, so on Clubhouse, I actually have a room. So it's H.O.P.E Reconnects on Clubhouse is my club. And so through that club, we do intercessory prayer in the morning, And we also have a room called Parenting the Proper Way. And this is a room that, it started out, God really dropped another download for me to start reading Proverbs to my little ones, my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old. And then I have been doing, reading Proverbs with my older ones as well. But, and so God prompted me one day just to go ahead and open up the room on Clubhouse and just do this Parenting the Proverbs Way room. And so I said, okay. So it was just really over, this was last year. It's since kind of shifted a little bit. And so now it's because it started going into conversations about breaking generational cycles and things like that. So it's Parenting the Proverbs Way is right now in a transition, but we are going to be shifting towards having more conversations with moms and, providing that safe space where we can talk about parenting issues and where we can talk about things that are happening right now, that we can start to break the generational cycles and, obviously the negative generational cycles, because, if there's any positive ones, we're good. But anything like the curses that, through the third and fourth generations, we want to make sure that those are broken off. And that what I find is that sometimes we just think that something has to be a certain way. And we don't know until we actually hear stories about, this is not how, this is something that can be shifted. This is something that can change. And then it starts to give you hope, and you start to then be able to discover that, hey, maybe I can do this too, or maybe that, hey, there's other moms out there that are wanting the same thing, and so we start to collaborate on projects and start to collaborate on, different other things and build friendships and things like that. And so it's really awesome just to be able to offer this, and I'm excited about what this Parenting the Proverbs Way room will be and what it's going to turn into, because I know that God, like I mentioned at the beginning, I know that God called me to do this and to really start to educate parents about how do we change the things, how do we start to shift things. And I definitely have that perspective growing up in a, this, if you will, dysfunctional home. And then, so I know what it's like to be that child that feels the disconnect. I know what it's like to be that teenager who can't speak her truth because she's shut down. I know what it's like to be that mom who wants to change things and she gets the resistance from everybody. I know what it's like to want to make some changes and to need the support, and how, it's just heartbreaking because you want something different, but you don't know how to go about it. And so that's what I offer is I want to make sure that my moms are good, that my moms know that they are supported, that they are empowered, that they are equipped to handle the challenges of parenting and family.
Folks, Miss Irina Curenton, the mom coach. You hear the passion, you hear the fire, you definitely want to follow what she's doing. you can feel it coming across. Irina, the Lord has expanded you in so many directions. One that I wanted to touch on, we mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to come back to it, and that was the book. So talk to us about the collaboration that you were a part of last year, and tell us what God did with that.
Okay, so the collaboration is, basically right now it's an international bestseller, and it's in this book there are 12 women who share their stories about one of their biggest fears as pertaining to their children. And so I was one of the co-authors in this book. And naturally I shared my testimony and my fear about growing up in an alcoholic home and passing on that that generational cycle to my kids. And so in this book, I share very transparently my process and what it's the ugly process of, going up to the bathroom and crying and going back to cry again because you just are like, how much longer do I have to go through this? How much longer is it? Because folks going through something a week, there's some persistence that's needed, but going through something for such an extended period of time as 12 years, there's a lot of things a lot of emotions that are triggered, a lot of things that happen, within that process. And so, I share very openly about flashbacks that came and, how I overcame that and what I actually did to get to a different place. And, all of the women in the book, they all share stories about how did they get through that fear through faith. And so it's a really, really powerful book that I definitely highly recommend to anyone. And so that's the book. Then also I have another book that's in the editing process right now, so it shall be coming. The book that that God told me to write was it's not published yet, but it's going to be. And so that actually goes more in depth because you can only write so much in a chapter, right? So the actual process, the 12-year process, God gave me an outline or blueprint that He took me through, and it's that 12 years. It was like 1 year basically was a step in the process, and so He came back after the 12 years. I went to God and I said, God, why did I have to go through this so long? And He told me, He said, daughter, I needed you to go through this process because I needed you to know and experience exactly what the women I'm sending you and the families I'm sending you to, what they've encountered. And so He said, furthermore, I'm going to take you through it another year. And this time I'm going to give you the blueprint. And so He told me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, again. So, basically then He gave me the step each per month, and then He had me go through it again and do it in 12 weeks. And now He's having me actually go through it again. I'm walking through it again a third time in 12 days. And so this book that's going to be coming, it's going to be all about the process in 12 days. And you can start to build your own faith through the process. And once what it's like to be triggered and walk through your grief and all of that stuff in this process. So I'm excited. There's definitely more to come. So it started with this book, this collaboration. And again, I do highly recommend it because it's definitely going to start to unlock some things for you.
Love it. Irina, for the reader, so what's the name of the collaboration? And then if you're able, tell us the title of the one that's coming.
So the collaboration is a secret prayer of a righteous black woman. So if you go to my Instagram, you can actually find a link and click on that link. I have copies of the book, so I don't have. You can find it on Amazon, but I have actual copies of it, and you can order it through me. So you can find out that information on my website, or my link tree, excuse me. On
Love
Instagram, at H.O.P.E Connect.
Love it, love it. And folks, we'll make sure we'll have all this information in the show notes as well on jerichoforce.com. So don't you worry about it. We'll have everything in there. Irina, as we come to the close of our conversation here, what's up next for the Mom Coach? Do you have any upcoming events or trainings? Because, once those moms find out what you can do, once those families understand breakthrough, they're like, Irina, what do you have next? So talk to us about, maybe what's coming up in the coming weeks and months for the Mom Coach.
Absolutely. Well, we have ongoing sessions about 3 times a month. We have co-working sessions. We have those accountability sessions that I have, and those are the kind of where we're working together on, actual projects and things. And then we're also talking through whatever the issues are. Then I also have an accelerator coming up quarterly. I usually do them quarterly, and so that will be, the next one will be offered in March. And then again, so it'll be in March, and then, quarterly after that. I also have a summit, or I will be having a summit come up as well, geared towards families. That'll be later in the year. And then I believe that I may be on somebody else, a guest on somebody else's summit as well. So there'll be some upcoming things and events that if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me there. I'll be posting information there. That's at H.O.P.E Reconnect. And you can also follow me on Facebook at H.O.P.E Reconnect, or you can go to my personal page at Irina Curenton.
Folks, there you have it, the Mom Coach. We'll have all her contact information in the show notes soon. Make sure you follow Irina on Instagram, connect with her on Clubhouse, her link tree. We'll have all that in the show notes. Irina, I want to thank you so much for taking time out to spend here on the Jericho Force podcast. You were so transparent, so vulnerable, and everybody, after listening to this, they'll know your passion and the fire inside of you. So, folks, you cannot go wrong by connecting with Irina. God uses her, and she's very passionate about the fundamental unit of life, which is the family. And that goes all the way back to the book of Genesis with the first family, Adam and Eve. So, Irina, thank you so much for joining us here on the Jericho Force podcast.
Absolutely, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to be on here with you. I just appreciate you again. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for all the families that you impact as well, and all of the wonderful business owners that you reach.
More than welcome. Folks, make sure you touch base with the Mom Coach, and that wraps up this episode of the Jericho Force podcast, and you know how we end things. Folks, we've been, in every episode, including tonight, we talk about how you live out your faith in the marketplace, how you integrate faith into the work that you do. So we always close it like this. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. See you next time on the Jericho Force podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Jericho Force podcast. You can catch us live on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and on demand. Check out jerichoforce.com/podcast for more details. To learn how to live out your faith in the marketplace, grab a copy of Jason Davis's book, Fortify, Being Rooted in God's Plan for Work and Business, available on Amazon.